today marks the one-year anniversary that Liz Truss was elected the leader of the Conservative Party. I can't even believe it. It was a year ago. It feels like literally 5 minutes ago. Anyway, she, of course, defeated Rishi Sunak. She had 81,000 votes there or thereabouts. He had about 60,000 votes. Now, obviously, she did not last long, 40-odd days. I do kind of, when I get to these anniversaries, take a second just to reflect on what the country perhaps might have been like had she continued. What do you think?
Well, I'm very glad that you're reflecting on this, because I think it was tragic what happened.
You've redeemed yourself after blatantly not watching my programme when you're not on it.
It was tragic what happened to Liz Truss. Liz Truss had recognised for the first time in 25 years, across Tony Blair's government all the way through to Boris Johnson, that actually for the country to prosper, you have to grow the economy. That taxing, borrowing and spending, which is effectively the way the state has operated for that 25-year period, doesn't work. It's that approach to economic management that got us into the trouble in which we are in. She recognised that it had to pay to work, that the working and middle classes needed the burden of both tax and regulation reduced, including small, medium-sized enterprises and independent traders, because she wanted to bin that IR35, if you might recall.
I do.
Which was trapping them in the tax net. She also recognised...
But a lot of people would push back on that and say that a lot of people... IR35 affects a lot of people unfairly, but there are a lot of people that misuse IR35 for their tax gains.
Sure. But she absolutely got the need for growth, and she also got the mechanism to drive growth. Sadly...
Go on.
Sadly,
I was about to ask you a question, but I thought I'd let you finish.
Yeah.
Go on.
Sadly, the organism of the state didn't like it, because it would necessarily have brought the state under pressure.
But why didn't she have the chops then to stand up against that pressure?
That is the great shame. The Bank of England was against her. The Bank of England was selling government bonds the day of and leading into the mini-budget. And by selling government bonds, they were taking cash out of the economy, pushing the cost of debt up. And it was partly Bank of England action that brought the pension funds under pressure, which then they said they had to bail out, and they blamed it all on the mini-budget. They blamed the collapse of sterling on the mini-budget, but actually currencies across the developed world were going down at quite a pace at the time that the mini-budget came out, because the Federal Reserve was raising interest rates and sucking capital in. And they used all of that as an excuse to effectively eject Liz Truss from office. And they brought Rishi Sunak back in, who has done more of the same, which is do his best to keep interest rates down, which he hasn't succeeded in doing, by the way, keeping interest rates down so the bloated state can go on affording its bloated debt levels. And Jeremy Hunt hasn't got a view at all on the importance of reducing tax. And I want to say one last thing before I go. Margaret Thatcher inherited a broken economy. She inherited an economy with high inflation. But the first thing she did was cut income tax, albeit from higher levels, but she recognised the tax burden had to be cut to get people into work.
Well, you say you want to say one last thing before you go, but I've got bad news for you. You've got another 20 minutes here.
I wondered where he was going.
Anyway, Jo, your thoughts?
Well, you know I disagree with Ben on this, and I think Liz Truss was an absolute unmitigated disaster. Not only was she elected leader of the Conservative Party, she was Prime Minister, as you say, for 49 days. So Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, the most recent of our Prime Ministers, 5 or 6 we've had in the umpteen years, have been put in place by less than 0.12% of the electorate, which I think is a shocking indictment of the state of our democracy. Now, I know Ben...
But hang on, because them's the rules and that is the framework, and people will be looking in and shouting in about people like Gordon Brown.
Absolutely, completely. No, I completely agree. I mean, there should have been a proper election. However, one of the things that Ben and I have discussed quite often, and I know Ben would like to have seen the Office of Budget Responsibility abolished completely, but they are still there now, and they were there. And one of the reasons that the markets got frit, to use Margaret Thatcher's phrase, was because Kwasi Kwarteng, the Liz Truss's Chancellor, and Liz Truss were refusing to share their information with the OBR. Now, that, frankly, is...
They weren't refusing, they wanted to move at speed.
Well, then you could argue that if you go at it
Do you think that was a mistake in hindsight?
I do think it was a mistake because they had this wretched organisation, the OBR, which everyone now sort of manifests into some sort of paragon of fiscal rectitude. And what they should have done was manage the OBR as a result of the pedestal on which it's been put. But the OBR is a fundamentally failing organisation.
Yes, I know, but
it's important to get that out there, Joe. At the time that she was doing her mini-budget, the OBR was predicting the national borrowing requirement for this year would be £177 billion. In that context, some of her budget moves may have been demanding. As it happens, it's turned out to be about 90 billion. They were out by a factor of 100%.
Well,
it's absolutely hopeless.
But nevertheless, and we know what you think about the OBR. They were there. She should have had a conversation with them, and so should her Chancellor. If you go at things like a bull in a china shop, which I don't know the woman, I've never met her, but she always
you didn't like her from the start. I did.
Well, I remember a conversation with you and Alex Dean when you both went down my throat when she was Foreign Secretary, because she used to
remember. Not only do I remember it, I've got a clip of it.
Oh, I knew you were going to show that.
Don't let me down, back office people. Where's my clip?
It'll come. Liz Truss, our Foreign Secretary, who seems to have a different outfit every day for a Barbie doll who is a Foreign Secretary.
Barbie doll?
And Alex and Michelle jumped down my throat and said, you know, I was being sexist. The point I was making that she was more keen in showing off a different outfit with a different backdrop, which is what Barbie is for, you know, Barbie at the hospital, Barbie at the airport, Barbie, etc., etc., that you couldn't possibly take her seriously. And these were photographs that were taken by her official photographer. Why do we need to see a picture of the Foreign Secretary, she then was, running in a pink tracksuit across Brooklyn Bridge?
She might be trying to connect a new audience to herself.
Well, she was, but it was all about
none
her.
of those are relevant, frankly.
No,
none of that's relevant.
But they are relevant, in the same way as, there are...
It's relevant to me because what I think it reflects, I think there's a lot of people in society that before she even took office, people had already made their mind up. They'd made decisions about her based on whatever it was. They decided that she was going to fail. And we talk about the ONS. It is primary school level to show your workings, like primary school children that are doing maths. They are always told in exams or wherever it is that you're doing stuff, how did you get to that answer? So I think actually I did have a lot of regard for what she was trying to achieve, but there were basic schoolgirl errors.
But the OBR was only formed in 2010. It was formed by George Osborne. It's a relatively new body.
But it doesn't
and
matter.
it hardly
It's
gets
there.
any forecast right.
But it's there.
No, but the point about government is not to be in hock to the OBR, not to be led by the nose by some ostensibly independent body which perpetually gets things wrong. The job of government and the job of Liz Truss was to deliver the promises she made during the Conservative election campaign, and that was to deregulate the economy, cut taxes. And that's what we needed. We still desperately need it.
But, Ben,
make it a very short
government is answerable to Parliament, not the other way around. And
but OBR's got nothing to do with Parliament or government.
But even if you think it's flawed, it was there. And I think, like Michelle says, you should have done. The only thing I would say about her, it would be interesting to know, had the Queen not died the day after, and government and everything stopped for 2 weeks, whether she would have gone quicker.
Well, what, even quicker than 40 odd days? Oh, blimey, what do you think?